Hi, I'm Megan from Excel at Home, and today I'm going to be talking to you about formulas. Again, I'm assuming that you've never used a formula in Microsoft Excel before, so I'm going to talk about just the very basics of how you do it, what kinds of things you can go try out so that you can get a little bit more familiar with it. This is not going to be an overview of every single formula. In fact, that's just plain silly. There's like 200 or more, I think, of them. But really, when you're using Excel, there's two main reasons why you would use Microsoft Excel versus Microsoft Word or just a pad of paper. First off is the organization. You've got all these nice rows and columns, has everything all in line, makes it super easy to see. The formatting is really easy. But the second reason, which is you use, I think, more often, are the formulas. They are so helpful. There are a million different formulas, things that you don't have to do manually. You don't have to add all those numbers up, or you don't have to search through this list looking for this one particular thing. You can use a formula and it's going to give you that value. It's super easy. Again, I'm assuming that you've never used formulas before. So in that case, I really recommend you use this formula builder. See how it says insert function, and formula and function pretty much mean the same thing. If you click on this little box opens up and it's going to give you, most recently used. So these are some formulas that I've used most recently. You can also click this drop down and find a formula for just about anything. So if you have an idea of what you want to use, but you don't really know how, you can come to this list and it'll help build it for you. I'm not going to use this right now because I know how to write formulas. I want to show you how you would do it without this. It's actually a little bit more efficient, but it does require some previous knowledge. But just know that this is here, that this can really help you. So if I already know what formula I'm going to use, and actually I'm going to go here. I've got an example set up. I've got some random numbers in here. Pretend this is your expenses. Perhaps for the month or the last couple of months, I made these numbers up. They're completely random. Well, I want to add these numbers together. Use my arrows and navigate over. And I just want to total these. Super easy. This is one of the simplest formulas you can do. So to get started, I'm going to press equals. And then, so the equal sign means I'm about to write a formula, and Excel knows to expect a formula at this point. Well, I know that to add up all my numbers, I'm going to use the sum function. But really, you could start typing if you put any letter in here, Excel is going to pop up with a list of all the possible functions that start with that letter. A little random fact that I discovered while I was researching for this video, there are no formulas that start with the letter J, but there is at least one formula for every other letter of the alphabet. Who knew? Kind of weird. There's no formula that starts with J. I don't know why. There just isn't. But for this one, I want to do a sum. So I'm just going to type in sum. Now notice there's several different functions that start with sum. So in order to tell Excel I'm done writing my function, the word of my function, I'm going to put an open parentheses. Now the next thing Excel is asking for, and it's being very helpful in telling you, okay, in order to give you a sum, I need a number. Okay, that number and number one, we're going to call those our parameters. Excel sometimes calls them arguments. I've always called them parameters. That's just the way I've always used them. And I'm going to talk about parameters in a lot of my video tutorials. So I want to make sure that you understand what I mean by that. A parameter is the value that is used within a formula. So a formula is not going to work without your parameter. And some formulas only require one parameter, some require 5 or sometimes more, just depending on what you're doing. So for this one, I'm doing a sum. I just need to give it some numbers. Notice how number 1 is just regular and bold. Number 2, right here, is in brackets. A parameter in brackets means that it's optional. Don't have to put it in. So in this case, the sum formula is telling you, okay, well, I need at least one number, minimum one number to add up. When there's only one, you're not really adding anything. Now, I could click on each individual number just to show you what that looks like. and say, okay, here's my first number, and then pay really close attention to the syntax or the formatting of your formula. Each parameter has to be separated by a comma. So I'm going to put in a comma, and notice number 2 is now bold, saying, okay, you gave me one number, now you're going to give me another one. And I could click this one. There's my number 2. Okay, so I could do it that way. I'm going to hit escape. I don't want to save it. I just wanted to show you what that looked like to have multiple numbers here. But really, Excel is also smart. You can give it a range. Again, you have to be really careful about this and the way that your formula works. Some formulas, if you put in a range for a certain parameter, it's not going to work. I'll show you kind of what I mean by that in a second. But in this case, I want to add up all of these numbers. So I just did a click and drag, and it highlighted the whole thing. And then to end any formula, you do close parentheses, and then hit either enter or tab. So hit enter, ta-da, it added up all my expenses. Now, one of the things that's so awesome about these formulas in Excel is that they are what we would call live, meaning they automatically update if anything changes. So, okay, I'm going to look at this number. The $589 for my mortgage, that doesn't make any sense. Who would have $5 on a mortgage? Maybe you had a mortgage fee or something like that. But I can say, oh no, that's the wrong number. It's supposed to be $589. It got entered wrong. So I'm going to just change this to say $589 and watch this 2000. Ooh, I pressed the button. Sorry, I clicked enter. I didn't mean to. But you can see what it did. It changed this $589 and it updated it to the 3000. It automatically knew, hey, one of the numbers within your sum range changed. Therefore, the formula is going to update. Really handy. So now I'm going to give you a slightly more complicated example. Might be a little bit much this first time, but I just want to show you again about parameters and how you can really use them. So let's say, for example, I want a total of everything I've spent on my mortgage. There's a couple different ways you can do this, but in this case, I think the best formula to use is a sum if. Let me show you how this one works. So I'm going to type in sum if. Notice there's a sum if and a sum ifs. I would not use sum ifs until you're ready for it. It's a little bit more complicated. Okay, so Excel is telling me I have 3 required parameters, three parameters, 2 that are required. So range and criteria are required, and sum range is optional. Now, if you're ever making these and you don't know what they mean, if you click here on sum if, a window will pop up with instructions on the formula, what it means, what it does, what the parameters are. So you can do that at any time. I know what these are, so I'm just going to tell you. The first one, range. It wants to know where have you put the values that you're checking against. So in this case, I want to know where are my categories for my expenses. So I'm going to give it this whole range. These are the values I'm checking against. When I hit a comma, always put a comma in between your parameters. And my criteria, I could type in the word, just so you know, mortgage right there, and it would work just fine. I highly, highly discourage doing that. And here's why. Because when you open up this spreadsheet, if you didn't know that that's what that formula was doing, you wouldn't be able to tell until you clicked into it and were able to look at it. But if you use, for example, this, I clicked the cell that says mortgage and said, that's my criteria. It's very easy, it's very visible, and you can change it if you need to. I'll show you in a second. So now I'm going to put in my third criteria, sum range. This is telling me what values do you want to add together. Notice that this is an optional parameter. The reason it's optional is because you could put in a criteria that said only add up numbers that are greater than 100. That's not the criteria that I have here. But because of that, because your sum range and your criteria range might be the same thing, that's why sum range is optional. In this case, we have a different sum range. We have numbers, the different numbers that we want to add up. So I'm going to highlight this here. Make sure that your criteria range and your sum range are the same length. You have the same number of values in there. I'm going to close it. Okay, and here's the little trick. I'm going to use this Format Painter button right here just to make it look pretty. Okay, so I spent about $1,400 on mortgage. Now, because I entered that parameter the way that I did as referencing this cell, I can click in here and it's telling me my mortgage. It's highlighted orange right there. I can change this. Let's say instead I want to know how much I spent on groceries. It automatically updated and told me I spent $560 on groceries. Now, again, that might be a little bit complicated if you've never used a formula before. Really just the point I want to get across right now is the things that you can do, that there's so many different options, and what a parameter is and how it works. So you can remember to write any formula, you hit your equal sign, type in your formula, you have an open parentheses, and then you just put in your parameters, and you're all done. Using the formula builder when you're brand new at this is going to be really helpful. I highly recommend it. And at this point, test this out. Look through that formula builder. See what kind of options there are, what things you might like to do. If you have any questions, please check my blog. I'm going to have tutorials on all of my favorite formulas and go really deeper into how they work, what kind of parameters they need, and how you can maybe trick them and use them different ways. And as always, you can send me an email and let me know what kinds of things you would still like to see in these tutorials and what is helpful, what you still have questions on. I would love to help. And as always, thank you for watching.